Okay. We are going to talk about some fun things with wreckit today. We had the 1.0 release last night, and we'll talk through some of the changes and just the process of throwing that together. And then I will be going into some of the kind of future plans with the wreckit desktop that we talked about. So join the chat, send me some messages, make sure things are live here. We may have a special guest joining us too, so we'll see. We'll do some teaching around wreckit. So first things first, we're going to switch over to and share the screen. Okay, so wreckit 1.0. Whenever you ship open source software, it's important that you kind of do some quality checking. And that's been one of the big criticisms of, this AI coding revolution is it produces a lot of slop. And there is some truth to that. So one of the things I did is pulled a couple of techniques, and I produced this specs folder to be able to document and kind of have a understanding of what is involved with wreckit 1.0, what the different principles of it are, and put those into specs. And then I can use these specs to have the agent check whether it has fully implemented them. So you can see here, we're going to look at this idea ingestion. This is the one that we looked at a little bit more yesterday. So idea ingestion phase is the entry point to the wreckit workflow. We list the state machine position. So I used a thinking model to help develop this. But the key here is these markdown specifications are where kind of the most potent requirements go. And so I spent some time kind of putting this together and verifying that they exactly followed what I intended wreckit to do, lists out what the agent cannot do. And each of these files, I went back and forth with Claude, just in the terminal, no loops, to check that these were documenting as we expected. So then added different failure modes. We completed this task yesterday of wreckit ideas, remove the S. There's a file flag. It's piped from standard in, and then what the interactive interview looks like, and then what this phase accomplishes. So we parse it into these item.jsons, and you can see slugify titles. Again, it kind of goes through each piece and preps for research. And then it also talks about errors. Once again, when you're developing anything agentically, markdown, and it's gone back and forth on specification driven development. The goal here isn't to necessarily use this as a spec driven development workflow. It's more as another form of documentation to verify that wreckit is doing exactly what we intended from a kind of a requirements perspective. So, and then finally, security error cases. So we saw that issue, and it's been pervasive, that wreckit during the idea stage gets a little greedy and likes to go out and actually start implementation. And so was working on that, and the suggested method is to actually inject an MCP server that can only do the read tool, bash tool, and the edit tool. And if it blocks those and blocks the other MCP tools, but it can only write out our ideas into the wreckit folder. So schema validation, we can see payload. And so here's where there's some ideas of where may not have been implemented yet. So there is a README in here that goes through and specifies where the specifications have been implemented. As you see, it updated this as I was going through, because once I had the idea ingestion, I would go into the prompt and I would use this prompt and inject this into wreckit, and it would grind on it. Now, again, this is out of sync a little bit, where there's some stuff that's not fully completed. I opted not to. There's a couple of stories in there that weren't needed for 1.0 and the kind of the QA release, but this is the QA process. And once I had it working, I did some manual testing and went through and verified that it was working, that the TUI was working correctly, that all the pieces were fitting together, and doing some tests myself last night, and then ultimately shipped it to NPM as version 1.0. There's a few more gaps in here around concurrency. We don't have that problem very much. Deep PRD validation, again, ideas, and this is where the hallucinations can get you a little bit. We didn't need to go kind of verify all that stuff. So yeah, that was spent a good kind of chunk of time doing last night. And then this morning, I've gone off and done, let's see, I'm going to show you this. So a friend of mine put together a list of other tools that you can kind of run the wreckit loops with. And I've been researching those and looking for features to bring back into wreckit. And one of them uses cloud sandboxes from a kind of friend of mine, a company called Fly.io called Sprites. And what Sprites do is they allow you to install this Sprite tool, but this Sprite tool is really kind of API driven. Think of it like an MCP server. And I've been looking at ways to have wreckit coordinate and run your wreckit loops in a cloud sandbox. So this is a paid thing. You do get trial credits. You can create a lot of sprites. They're really inexpensive, and you don't pay for them when they're not running. But one example I want to show you, I've got a couple of these going right now as tests. This is with another tool to manage sprites. So I told it to start a sprite, and now it's just feeding me back the cloud agent that's running in this sprite. This is not something that's in wreckit quite yet, but just again, when you're thinking about new features, one of the things I've done with AI tooling is I'll go and spike. And a spike is a test, a prototype to go prove that something works and to develop the idea a little bit more. And so this spike is using sprites to port wreckit to Elixir. So you saw me, and now that code is so much easier to generate, it's just I do a lot of these spikes because it helps me kind of figure out and shape and guide the prompts for when I really do go and want to write the final software. So I did a spike around that. You can kind of see that one still going. It's been running for a couple of hours. I definitely am starting to use my token pipe a little bit more. I think I could run 2 or 3 more of these at once. But then the last piece is I also did a spike around the wreckit desktop. So we talked about that, and there's a couple different ways to do it. You can see all my wreckit spikes in here. App, Tori. Now, again, it's important to do hello worlds to just figure out kind of what works. So this was a spike I did with wreckit this morning. And this sets up a full desktop app. So if I remember the command, we can get this running and show this here. Mix help. Yeah, this is the one I want. So we're going to run this in development mode. Runs the build, and we should see a Mac app pop up that runs a web interface that we'll be able to eventually build wreckit into. I think desktop apps, especially with LLMs like we have available now, are really seeing a resurgence in just how useful they are. It popped up over here. This wraps a tool called Phoenix, but you can see we have a full app here. This is a web view, but bunch of cool stuff. Let's see, I've got my icons. Yeah, I think you can see the icons in the chat, but there we go. There's an icon up here. There it is. So playing with, the ability to, build out these apps. Because this is a web view, we'll build a web view for the wreckit tool, so you can kind of see what's going on. We already have the terminal view, and again, just kind of keep building this out day by day. Build, ship, and teach. So yeah, if you can hear it, I'm a little under the weather, but yeah, working through and moving forward. So any questions? See if there's any questions from X. Learning to code with Python, looking forward to using AI tools to help learning along the way. Nice to see how you work with your tools. Yeah. Generation Recon, yeah. I mean, the coding would just encourage people to jump into it. We know ChatGPT, we know, Anthropic. I have been suggesting a new one called ZAI. ZAI is the coding tool that, again, as we're using more and more tokens, they're less expensive from ZAI with the ZAI coding plans. If you're interested in more of that and you want to buy one of the plans, we put some instructions at the top of the wreckit README. But as you're learning, one of the things is you can just type, and this is kind of the origin of vibe coding, and just start from the most basic question of, tell me about how to code with Python, and just pull that thread as you're learning, based on where you're at. So let's see. Yeah, go to python.org, choose your editor. I would encourage Cursor. Cursor's still a pretty good editor. I have gotten used to it enough that I don't really use VS Code anymore. Coding's a skill. Playing, practice takes practice. I would agree with that. AI coding is a skill that's different than coding, and it takes practice. But one of the things about LLMs like this, and you can do this with ChatGPT, you can do this with any of them. You can do this with, and I'll show you OpenRouter in just a second, so you can go do it for free. But ask questions. Be curious is the real point. You don't need to. One of the best uses of these tools is it's a teacher. You kind of have to, guide it based on whatever you're doing. But if you just ask these questions back and forth, you'll eventually, and ask, again, the most basic questions. So, let's ask another one. So we've installed Python, installed VS Code. You have to have an idea for what you want to do with Python, but yeah, Treats, I can answer that for you in just a second. But tell me how to generate code with an LLM that I can run on my computer. Again, these are like, explain it to me like I'm 5 questions. That's the point. LLMs will never make fun of you for asking the dumbest questions in the world. This is just between you and the computer. And even at my stage, I've learned more in the last year with the knowledge and background that I have than anywhere in the previous part. My just ability to learn has really, really accelerated. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. And I'm happy to talk if there's somebody who wants to come on and we could do a coding session where I teach you some coding. We could definitely queue that up. So to Treat's question, so we talked yesterday about we're going to build wreckit into a desktop app. Lots of ideas behind why we chose this route. And I personally think that it's going to be a lot more of a common route in the future. One, it's safer with crypto. Desktop app, you keep your keys on the local machine. By downloading a desktop app, we can take advantage of some of the operating system's security features to protect keys, issue a wallet, and then through that wallet, you can fund that wallet with Solana, for instance. And again, wreckit takes LLM tokens. LLM tokens cost money, depending where you get them from. I was going to show Open Router. I'll come back to that in a second. And they're not a lot, but they have to come from somewhere. And we'll be able to use. We're going to set up using crypto to buy those LLM tokens, so you can build things with wreckit just using a Solana wallet, and then. So again, I think you could see probably by the end of the week we'll have some UI prototypes. But in the same way you go to a website, you'll be able to download this app, and we'll call it the wreckit app. And there's again some alternatives out there. I like to do my research, and I have my own opinions about user experience. Nothing out there that does a wreckit loop in a desktop app that we've seen. So we would be the first. Any other questions? Check. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we're going to wrap it there. Again, feel free to submit questions or anything you want to see. I'll just be talking about my daily updates on these streams, and yeah, making progress every day. So keep coding, and we'll see you on the next one.